But let's shift over to the other New York team, the New York Jets, my New York Jets. They've been pretty busy to start free agency. Obviously, they came into it with the number 2 in cap space, and they have definitely, they've been making some moves so far. I know it's not really what we expected because they're supposed to be big players in Allen Robinson. He obviously got tagged, but they do get the number 1 receiver that we've kind of all been waiting for, and Corey Davis. And he's a guy who he was a 5th overall pick, 1 pick ahead of Jamal Adams. And he is someone who really fits this offense well. He's coming off a really nice 2020 where it looked like his career was really off to a bad start. Obviously, his 5th-year option didn't get picked up by Tennessee, but he had 984 yards, 5 touchdowns, while being a number 2 receiver in a run-heavy offense. So clearly the talent is there with Corey Davis. No one's ever questioned that. And this deal, it's 3 years, $37.5 million. He's still only 26 years old, so he's young. And the reason I really like this move for the Jets is because, one, he's a great run blocker, which is big in this new Shanahan scheme, LaFleur scheme. They like to run it outside. And 2, he's really good at catching the deep ball and getting chunk yardage. And this offense was last in yards per play last year. It was the least explosive in football. You really, to watch this Jets team over a full 16-game season, had to play a lot of mental gymnastics with yourself to be able to get through it. So he's a guy, he's big, he's fast, he gets jump balls. So I do like this move. I think they are paying him based off projection, not production, because obviously he had a breakout year last year, but you still hope for him to bounce off that and improve even more. So I like this move a lot. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, if you're a Jets fan, you obviously got to feel good about it, especially coming off of last year. I was kind of looking through this, in preparation for the show, and his numbers compared to the number 1 receiver in tight end or in Tennessee, AJ Brown, they're not that far off. Brown had 106 targets, Davis 92, and from a 1-2, that's pretty good. But Brown 70 catches, Davis 65. That's really not that far off. And Davis had more yards per target than AJ Brown. Davis had 10.7, Brown had 10.1. So the potential is certainly there with Corey Davis and, 5th overall pick, very talented guy coming off of the best year of his career. And it's definitely a good pickup, but I actually have a question for you. Now that he's signed, is he the number 1 guy in New York?
Yeah, so Crowder is a great guy, great player, but he's more of a slot guy in this system. And so he's not going to be going out wide and going deep. That's what Corey Davis is going to do. You have Denzel Mims lined up across from him. He's really unproven, 2nd-round pick out of Baylor last year. But yeah, he is the number 1 in this offense. They're paying him to do so, obviously. 27 guaranteed. They believe in him. He's going to have a chance to hit the market again young. And this is a move where, we knew they needed to get a number 1. As I said earlier, Allen Robinson was talked about. I talked about wanting Curtis Samuel, who just signed with the football team. But, he wasn't really on the radar. I'm not going to lie. I was a little surprised when I saw it. But the more that I look into us and the price range that we got him at, I really like it. He's getting less per year than Nelson Aguilar, who just signed with the Patriots. We'll get into them in a second. I thought that was really surprising. But yeah, for sure. He is the number 1. That's what they're paying him to be. And it's a big need for this offense, which is devoid of any type of offensive talent. But let's shift to the other big move the Jets made. And this is one where I like even more, weirdly to say. The Jets bring in Carl Lawson, the pass rusher from the Bengals. Before this year, he didn't really get a chance to shine. And when you look at the, the overlying numbers, you see 5.5 sacks. You're thinking that's not anything special for a pass rusher, but it's more than just the sacks with him. He was 1st in QB knockdowns, 2nd in QB hits, and 4th in pressures. So he is great at winning the line of scrimmage and getting after the quarterback. And the Jets, they really haven't had a dominant pass rusher since John Abraham. So this is the guy who they are paying to be the next version of him. This defense, I should say, really needed a guy to, pressure, because obviously the secondary has been a place of concern the last few years. But if you get good guys to rush after the quarterback, the secondary falls into place a little bit. The quarterbacks have to get the ball out earlier. That's what we saw a lot of last year. They blitzed the 6th highest rate in the NFL. But if you can't get pressure, your DBs are going to get toasted. So 3 years, $45 million. It's certainly a hefty price to pay for a guy who hasn't had that explosion yet. But I do think this is a really good fit in Robert Saleh's defense.
Right. And, he had that big year last year, but that's really all he's done so far in his career. 2020 was certainly his breakout year, but Yeah, you can't look past the numbers. 32 QB hits, 5.5 sacks, 27 QB knockdowns, which led the NFL. So this guy, he's shown that he can play. And I really like this. The Jets need an edge guy. And I really like this. 30 million guaranteed. I think that's fine. I think this is a good signing for the Jets. I like it more than the Corey Davis signing. And I'll kind of circle back to Corey Davis a little bit because here's where I'm not entirely sold. If he's going to be the number one guy, I just don't know how Corey Davis is going to do when he's facing top defensive backs. That's the one thing that kind of concerns me. Like in Tennessee, when he had AJ Brown as number one, he was, he improved, but I just that's the only reason why I'm not entirely sold about it. So I mean, we'll see. But overall, I think Lawson and Davis, assuming Davis can be what they want him to be, I think that these are two good pickups and it's a step in the right direction for this team.
Yeah, these were must gets. Obviously, this is a year where you exploit the cap because it went down and you have so many teams that are up against it trying to, we see Taysom Hill getting $140 million contracts just to maneuver the cap here. And the Jets had so much flexibility. I will say, though, the one thing that is disappointing is they haven't brought an offensive line help. Joe Tooney, who I've raved about for weeks, was a number one guy on the wish list. They weren't able to get him for whatever reason. Obviously, he chose to be a part of the Chiefs. Like, you can't go wrong with Patrick Mahomes. But so that is something they're going to have to address. And the one other thing that I think is interesting here, which Jet fans are finally coming into that realization, including me, is not to read too into the tea leaves here, but I think the way that they're approaching this offseason shows that they aren't serious players in Deshaun Watson. And the reason I say that is they're still leaving a lot of holes on the table. And it's fine if they keep their picks, right? Because they have 2 firsts the next 2 years. They have seconds. They have thirds. They have the draft capital to go out and get a corner and get an offensive lineman. But if Deshaun Watson is seriously in play, you're going to be looking at a Houston Texans situation with the Jets where he's running for his life. The defense is terrible. So I think the way that they're approaching this offseason is they're going to roll with the second overall pick. They're going to get a quarterback. I don't want to talk too much about Sam Darnold because, there's so much going on right now in the league. Speculation is another story. But I think that's what this signals to me. I don't know if that's reading too into it. I'm curious what you think as an outside guy because I've been wanting Watson all along. But it does look like now that it's probably not going to be possible. Do you think that the offseason says what I think it says?
Yes. I mean, I think we can all agree. Sam Darnold is kind of done as the Jets QB. I don't really know where he's going to go now with what Washington has done, but they have the number 2 overall pick. I don't see them, if they keep that pick, I don't see them taking anyone other than Zach Wilson. So I think, Deshaun Watson, I don't really know what his state is now, but I think Zach Wilson at number 2, they can do that. And with all the draft capital they had, the world was really their oyster. They could do with this offseason whatever they wanted to do. If they wanted to save up for the future, do that. Or if they wanted to load up on Deshaun Watson, that was also a possibility. So, yes, I don't really know how much of a priority getting Deshaun Watson is now, but I do kind of like what they've done, and they've shown some improvement. I don't think they're there with the rest of the AFC East, though. I still think when you compare the teams that they might be the at least good team in the division, but they're taking a step in the right direction, and you got to give them credit for that.
Yeah, they're not even close where they need to be contender. Right now, they do have the most cap space in football with 50. A few other minor moves they made. They brought in former Lions linebacker Gerard Davis on a 1-year kind of prove-it deal. He's been someone that scouts say was underutilized in Detroit, and they brought in a special teamer from the Saints.